Okay, Anjaya, we will begin. As and when students join, they will get the content.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, in the previous class, we were talking about types of effects in media literacy. Okay, we have seen all these things: media literacy on interactive platforms. Okay, mediated communication, we talked about it. Social media literacy, we talked about it. Okay, then we talked about it, differences between misinformation, disinformation. We talked about what information literacy is. And then we are occupied with the types of effects. We were busy with knowing what are the types of effects. As part of this, we discussed cognitive type effects. We discussed belief type effects, attitudinal type effects, emotional type effects. Today, we will see other things. There is another type effect called physiological. Physiological. Media can influence our automatic bodily systems, which are physiological type effects. These are usually beyond our conscious control, such as the contraction of the pupil of the eye when we look at a bright light. We cannot control the degree to which pupil contracts, but we can look away from bright lights and thus prevent the iris from contracting. So when we cannot look at a light constantly for a period of time, okay, immediately our pupils get changed. Okay, our pupil get contracted. So it's all automatic, okay, automatic bodily systems. Sometimes when we watch a particular film, automatically tears come. We feel, we resonate with the scene because of we see some physiological effect through tears in our eyes. Tears in our eyes. It has a psychological also. Okay, we will see if at all that effect is. Now we have seen already emotional effects. When the media, there are many physiological effects that usually serve to arouse us. A suspenseful mystery serves to elevate our blood pressure and heart rate. So when a horror film triggers rapid breathing and sweaty palms. Hearing a patriotic song might raise goosebumps on our skin. Okay, these are physiological effects. That's true. So when we watch horror films, sometimes we get sweat. Certain mystery, certain suspenseful mystery when we watch in films, our blood pressure goes high, heart rate goes high. So these are all physiological effects that we are aware of. A fast might make us laugh so hard that we are unable to stop, even when laughing becomes painful. Or listening to music can calm and relax us by reducing our heartbeat and bringing our rate of breathing down to a regular slow rate. Okay. Sometimes when we are tensed, when we are physically tired, we listen to relaxed music and fall fast asleep. Yeah. Over time, our physiological responses to a particular media messages can change. For example, when we see our first horror movie, our heart rate might go through the roof. Because it's the first instance, we are watching a horror film. So our heart rate may go high. But if it is constantly you are exposed to horror films, that gets reduced. But if we keep watching horror movies, we might find that it makes more and more go to trigger any increase in the heart rate. Gradually, over many exposure to horror films, the physiological responses were down. Okay, more exposure, then it is our heartbeat is normalized. We don't get that increase in heartbeat. The physiological effects. Next is behavioral type effects. Media can trigger actions. Okay, spelling mistake. Media can trigger actions. This is the behavioral type effect. For example, after seeing an ad for a product, we might get on a website and order for the product. So because we find some sort of utility from the product, hence we go, or it is on offer. So we immediately go to the website and order for the product. So this is behavioral type effects. Or we may read about something disturbing even on a news site on the internet and call a friend to talk about it. There are also long-term effects to our behavior. For example, think about when you first got access to a computer to surf the internet. Initially, you might have visited a lot of sites for a few minutes each, but over time, you developed a pattern of going to a few favorite sites, spending more and more time on particular site. This is behavioral change. Of course, when we are exposed to a new thing, okay, we want to see everything in few minutes, chak, chak, chak. Slowly, having access to it, slowly we now tend to develop our own favorite sites, okay, and spend more time on it, surfing, getting to know the information, okay. Perhaps you have gotten to a point where you spend almost all your waking hours playing certain games or connecting with friends on a social networking site, okay. Today, if you ask any youth, when do you sleep? They will say 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I don't know, because so much engrossed, so much uh, media saturated, saturated. Perhaps your internet behavioral habit is displacing the other activities such as exercising. Okay, hardly we see young exercising. Okay, hanging out with friends in real life, going to films, going to no exhibitions, fairs. Okay, or going to a class. Perhaps this behavioral habit has moved into an addiction. Many people continue interacting with friends on social networks for the purpose of getting emotional support, even though research repeatedly shows that emotional support is far more satisfying offline than online. Next one is macro type effects. Macro type effects. The 6 type of effects presented above all effects on individual. Okay, they are physiological, behavioral, emotional, attitudinal, all these effects. The media also exert their influence on larger units such as organizations, institutions, and society. This influence results in macro type effects. We will see what it is. Some institutions such as politics have fundamentally changed due to the direct influence of the media, especially television and now the internet. Other institutions such as family, society, and religion have changed because of many different social pressures, and the media have served to heighten these pressures. Okay. Family, okay. Parents have learned to treat the adults in an appropriate manner, okay, due to the suicide cases that are arising day by day, okay. So parents have learned to adapt to the situations that their children are undergoing. Society, okay, lot of changes, okay. So this is called macro type effects, okay, where an organization or an institution goes through a change, goes through a change. The media have the potential to bring the family together to share a common experience. Families can build a bonding ritual around shared media behaviors and use those exposures as chance to talk and bond. For example, in the 1990s, many households had only one television and viewing was a common family activity. That's true. However, few families now use television other media in this way. Family members rarely share viewing time. Okay, those days, okay, television was viewed in a common room, in a veranda. But today, with the advent of new technologies, devices, people are glued to their own devices, And the content different family members expose themselves to is fragmenting so that family members rarely share the same media experience. Modern family structures have evolved to include television, smartphone, other forms of media use in daily life, even if this means limiting family interactions. Clearly, family structures and interaction patterns have been changing over the past 3 decades. There are many reasons for this. Media influence is a key element in this change, but not only one. The additional elements of economic demands, the rise in importance of careers, and change in lifestyle preferences have all contributed to the probability of change in the institution of a family. Economic demands, okay, as everybody works for money, okay, works for money, more hours of work, maybe a small family where husband, child, and husband, wife, and child, both of them work, child is at risk. So more importance is given to career than the character. Our lifestyle changes, eating habits will change, our lifestyle preferences change. Okay. Next is factors that influence media effects. What are the factors that influence media effects? We will see in this slide. Media scholars have produced a huge research literature that has identified hundreds of such factors. There are two kinds of factors, namely baseline factors and fluctuation factors. Okay. So two factors, two factors have been identified. Media scholars, what are they? Baseline factors and fluctuation factors. When considering process effects, it is important to think in terms of baseline. Okay. What goes into the process of making a news item or a product or a text? The baseline is the typically level of risk for an effect. It is fairly stable over time, but it can gradually increase or gradually decrease. Baselines are shaped by long-term conditioning. Next one is fluctuation effects, which indicate immediate effects. A fluctuation effect will increase to break through the manifestation level, that is, those changes in behavior or knowledge that we can observe. It is how strong an influence is on triggering a temporary moment of a baseline. So baseline effect is concerned with regard to the process, and the fluctuation is considered with regard to the content or the message or the knowledge or the behavior. Every day, our baselines are being shaped by factors from the media and factors in our own lives. We will see what it is only when we go through examples, it will be clear. Some of those factors increase the likelihood of a particular effect being manifested, while others decrease that likelihood. If there are more factors that increase the likelihood of manifestation, then the baseline will gradually ascend to higher levels of risk. But if the factors that decrease the likelihood are more powerful over time, then the baseline will gradually descend. We will see what they are. So the baseline factors are, baselines are most affected by a person's characteristics that remain relatively stable over time. Like demographics, they relatively remain stable. This is not to say that they never change. These factors can change over time, but the change is typically gradual and take years, no minutes to show change. Okay, so it will take gradual, maybe sometimes months, sometimes years, but there is a change over time. Number one is demographics. In the early days of media effects research, it was a popular practice for scholars to test demographic variables, especially ethnicity, age, household income, and educational level as predicators of media effects. Because there is a relation between the effect and the education level, effect on the household income, effect on the age. Okay, we will see the example. These demographic attributes of individuals were generally found to be useful in explaining differences in exposure patterns. For example, your children were found to prefer living in households with lower income, and education levels were found to prefer certain kinds of media and particular content that was different from people living in households with higher levels of income. Okay, see, to put it in simple words, okay, the content preferences of wealthy class or the rich or the well-informed, means those who are knowledge, okay, educated, is entirely different from the people or the children, okay, who are with lesser income, who are with lesser education levels. Okay, they prefer certain type of content, the others prefer. So there is a difference in the content accessing or exposure to content based on demographics. The reasoning was that different exposure patterns would predict differences in effects, and this is what research typically found. Over time, the value of using demographic indicators to predict patterns of media exposure and media effects has eroded with proliferation of media and content choices. Okay, over the years, okay, that particular idea is out of sight. For example, there is no longer a dominant pattern of media exposure practices that is common among all females, and that differs substantially from a dominant pattern of media exposure practices that is common among all males. Researchers shifted away from testing the ability of attribute variables such as demographics to predict media effects and moved toward testing the ability of active variables. For example, researchers moved away from testing the attribute type variables of chronological age and instead tested the active type variable of development in developmental maturity. The way the particular person responds to a particular news item, responds to a particular situation. Okay. Now we are all talking about maturity. Okay, so a person may be 40 years old, but he may not achieve that mental. The person may not have a maturity. A person having 20 years old, but he has a maturity. Okay. Likewise, other attribute type variables such as gender, ethnicity, income, education were replaced by active type variables such as cognitive abilities. So we have discussed about cognitive realm of a person, okay, that which is related to thinking processes, personal locus, that means personal focus, okay, knowledge structures, sociological factors, okay, from which the person is brought up, and media exposure habits. So what is the how much time he or she spends? What is the particular media that he or she accesses on a daily basis? Okay. Next one is developmental maturity. The first one is the demographics. Okay, we are talking about demographics from the point of baseline factors. Second one is developmental maturities. We mature cognitively, that means our thinking process, emotionally, feeling level, and morally, that means judgment level. Okay, as we age, as we grow in age, we try to mature from the point of view of cognitive, emotional, and moral. When we are very young, our minds, emotions, and moral reasoning are beginning to develop and thus have a lower ceiling of capacity than when these are more fully developed. Okay, when we are children, when we are young, we may not have that capacity to form a particular judgment or think about it or feel about it. Okay, but it grows as we grow in age. As we mature in these areas, we are able to process more information and to apply more sophisticated skills well. This gives us the capacity to move our baselines closer to the manifestation level for the effects we want to experience and away from the manifestation level for effects we want to avoid. As children mature, they expand their cognitive abilities. Okay, person who is at 5 years old is not the same at 10 years old. Thinking, feeling, and action, behavioral pattern. A person who is at 10 years old is not the same at 20 years old. Okay, so as the point is, as we grow in age, maturity grows. Maturity grows. Supposed to grow. Okay, that is, they are less influenced by single salient feature of a message and process many more elements in a message. The point here is processing the message, processing the content, thinking pattern, the ideation pattern, which allows them to understand context more fully. They are not limited to concrete thinking, but get better at making inferences accurately because they have grown, they have seen, they have accessed a lot of information. They can think about thinking itself. That is, they can engage in meta thinking, which helps them monitor their media exposures and potential effects those exposures have on them. Okay, suppose they want to make a particular comment on a particular political leader. So that depends on what sort of media he is exposed to. Is he exposed to Inadu or Sakshi? Whom is he going to make a critical judgment about? Okay. Is he related to Sakshi or Inadu newspaper? So that those things matter. So the meta thinking happens. Thus, as children age, they are more capable of staying in a self-reflexive exposure state where they can process media messages and learn from them. This makes it possible for them to exert greater control over the shape of their baselines as well as other fluctuations from those baselines. As for emotional reactions, people at lower levels of maturity are limited in the capacity to control their emotions and behaviors. Okay, so those who are those who are emotional, they lack thinking skills because they are more captured by emotions than ideas or thinking. So as part of maturity, developmental maturity, we have certain points to consider. Next is cognitive abilities. The development maturity suggests potentialities. That is, at a given age, there are limits to what people can understand and how they go about reasoning. For example, if we ask a 5-year-old girl about a rape incident, what she or he can elaborate on it, it's very difficult because they are not at all knowing what the concept of rape is, all those things. Okay. But developmental potentialities are not the same as actual abilities. That is, not everyone who has the same level of cognitive abilities, such as IQ and the 7 skills of media literacy, can think about or ideate about it on the same level. Okay, it's very difficult. For example, a 25 years old girl, 24 years old boy, can they think in the same lines about the issue? No, it's very difficult to assess because they are coming from different backgrounds, different IQ levels, different cognitive abilities. Okay, they sometimes can be at the same level, but majority of time they are not at the personal locus. Personal locus is the combination of an individual's goals and drives for media exposure. This may be the most important factor influencing a person's baseline because it interacts so strongly with the other baseline factors discussed in the section. They are cognitive abilities, demographics. Okay. Furthermore, it determines the 7th factor, which is person's media exposure habits. Okay. As we said in the previous classes, selective exposure to the content, selective attention, selective retention, selective perception. Okay, so you read what you want to read, you see what you want to see, you watch what you want to watch. The person's media exposure habits. When a personal locus is strong, the person has the drive energy to make the most of their maturities, skills, knowledge structures, sociological factors, and lifestyle. People who have a strong personal locus have more awareness of the effects process. So they have constructed their baseline to conform to their personal goals. This means that there are particular effects they want to achieve with the help of media. For these effects, they have constructed a baseline fairly close to manifestation level so that a single exposure to the proper media message can achieve the effect. People with a strong personal locus are also aware that there are some effects that they do not want to manifest within themselves. So they construct baselines for those effects far from the manifestation level. So how do you develop this personal locus? Because of your media exposure to the contents, the messages. Okay. So you try to expose yourself to the things that you want to and formulate your own attitude or behavior towards it. Knowledge structure. People who have accumulated a large amount of knowledge learn the most from media, provided that the information is well organized in their minds. Okay. Okay. Just because you read newspapers every day, okay, you may not be knowledgeable. Okay. When do you become knowledgeable? When do you become resourceful? Okay. So when you keep your knowledge into practice. Okay. When you keep your knowledge into practice, when you keep your knowledge into discussion, okay, then you'll be able to organize your information or knowledge in your mind. When people have a well-developed knowledge structure on a particular topic, they are better able to acquire more information quickly, assess its credibility, and incorporate that new information more effectively as they develop even more elaborate and useful knowledge structure. For example, if you want to know something about artificial intelligence, okay, so you know something about artificial intelligence and you go and Google it. So you know what fits your topic. That means you are processing your knowledge. You are processing your knowledge. You are trying to look whether it is credible information or not, whether this information fits my topic or not. Okay, that's knowledge structure. With many topics, we have no choice but to reply primarily at the media as source of information. This is what makes the media so powerful as a socializing influence. We cannot check out the media information by comparing it to other information from other sources, such as real life experiences. Next one is sociological factors. The degree of socialization is related to the amount of influence the media will have. Okay, the degree of socialization is related to the amount of influence media will have. People who have been consistently socialized with particular values for a long period of time will have a relatively stable baseline. So they are not easily changed because they have been practicing those values for a long time. That is the baseline, will be very resistant to change. That's very difficult. People who were addicted to read newspapers, okay, ask them to access electronic newspaper, they find it very difficult because that is that particular value of feeling and touching the newspaper has ingrained in them. So it's very difficult to change. Okay, it's unlikely that the media will be able to exert a strong enough influence to cause a fluctuation, especially one big enough to break through the manifestation. We learn norms by observing other people in real life and through the media. Very relatable point. We learn so many things by observing other people, how behaving, okay, talking, relating. Same, we have access in the media also. So we try to live others' life rather than living our lives. The media present many characters who communicate a great deal of social information to viewers. These messages are especially influential on the socialization of children because young people have less experience in real life to counterbalance the media portrayals. Okay, so the conversation between the young will be what is portrayed, the particular movie dialogues or the particular dress code, the particular clothing or the particular conversation. That will be the discussion, the point of discussion among youth, because they are not much experienced with the real life. They do not know the reality behind the portrayals, media portrayals. Okay, hence media literacy is called for. In addition, many adults have very limited real-world information to counterbalance media portrayals. So they too are susceptible to media. We do not know why sewage cleaning is done by one particular people. Can you identify why they are only across such people? They do not know because it has so many sociological implications. Yeah. Next is media exposure habits. Media exposure habits. Each of us has a set of media exposure habits that focuses our attention on certain media and on certain types of messages presented by those media. Initially, when I was a young school-going boy, I only used to read Enadu because that's the only newspaper available at my house. That's one. Number two, I used to only have a selective content, only sports, that too cricket, nothing else. So I used to read from A to Z of the cricket and have a discussion with my schoolmates. So you know that particular over, he bowled this way. So I used to get those informations from the newspaper and have a discussion because we do not know. No, we have not reached to discuss about various things. We have not grown in our mental abilities. Okay, in other words, the maturity. For example, some people like to surf the net and go to all kinds of sites indiscriminately. In this case, they are exposed to a very wide range of messages and no single type of message is likely to have much effect on their baseline. So why? Because they have access to so many other signs. They are not focused on a particular message. When they focus on particular message, there is an effect. In contrast, other people might spend all their time playing violent video games and watching action adventure movies. These people are likely to have a baseline very close to the manifestation level of aggressive behavior. So, as a cultivation theory, George Gebner also said, the more you are exposed, the more you become. The more you are exposed to one particular message, the more you tend to become that. Okay, the more you tend to expose it to outside. Okay. Suppose you are exposed to violence, you will be violent. So that's the manifestation level. Next factor is fluctuation factors. We have seen what factors that contribute to media effects. Two factors: baseline factors and fluctuation factors. We have seen with regard to baseline factors, they are namely media exposure, sociological factors, knowledge structure, cognitive abilities, personal locus, developmental maturities, and demographics. Now we are focused on fluctuation factors. Okay. While understanding where your baselines are in the process of influence, it's also important to monitor the factors that can trigger a fluctuation of your baseline. What triggers the baseline factors? What triggers? Maybe your knowledge structure. Okay. Maybe our developmental maturities. What triggers it? The first one is content of the messages. What is communicated through a particular message? That decides whether there is an effect or not. It matters what you expose yourself to in a particular media session. Let's say you have a habitual exposure pattern of horror and action adventure shows, and your baseline is very high for an aggressive effect. If you watch another hour of video, will that be enough to push you above the manifestation level? It depends on what content you watch. Suppose you are exposed to more violence, you become more violent in your real life because that's what is you are exposed to. Okay. Suppose you are more exposed to showing love, you will manifest the same in your real life. Okay. If you watch a comedy in which the characters help each other, the themes are pro-social, then you are likely to move away from the manifestation level. But if you watch a highly violent program, then you will be more likely to move toward the manifestation level. Next is the context. First one is the content of the message. Second one is the content of the portrayal. What is the context? Sorry. What is the context of the portrayal? The meaning of the messages arises from the way they are portrayed, especially social lessons. For example, in most of our films, okay, women are limited to kitchen. Women are limited to kitchen. Patriarchy. Patriarchy. The ideology is patriarchy. How it is represented? Confining them to kitchen. Confining them to kitchen. Okay. So when the characters in a story are portrayed as being highly attractive, when their actions are portrayed as being justified, and when they are rewarded for those actions, then audiences will likely identify with those attractive characters, experience the action from the point of view, and learn from this vicarious experience. Audiences are likely to accept the meaning of the experience that was portrayed by those characters. But in reality, it is not the case. In reality, it is not the case. That younger audience are failed to analyze. This is why the portrayal of violence in the media is so dangerous. The good guys are as likely as the bad guys to commit acts of violence. The good guys' violent acts are almost always portrayed as being justified. Okay, hero kills villain. It's good, but if villain kills someone, it is bad. Okay, here the actions of good guys are justified, and they are rarely punished. The meaning of violence then is that if you are a good guy, violence is an essential and successful means of resolving conflict. Because each viewer regards himself or herself as a good guy, viewers learn that it's okay for them to use violence as a means to solve a conflict. That's what is projected, portrayed. Today I leave at 4:45 because of some emergency work. Is that okay, Anjaya?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next is cognitive complexity of content. Cognitive complexity of a content. So we have seen content of the message as the fluctuation factor. We have seen context of the portrayal as the fluctuation factor. Now the third thing is cognitive complexity of content. When a media message makes few cognitive demands on the audience, people can process its meaning easier. So what is the thought process that is involved in making meaning out of content? The more demands the narrative makes on a person's working memory, the less well facts will be comprehended and remembered. For example, children remember news better from television than from print media because visuals are imprinted. Okay, it is easy for them to associate regardless of their reading proficiency. This is because television news can provide information in several channels at once: picture, words, and sound. And when the information is semantically redundant, that is, it complements and reinforces each other, learning is achieved better. So here, through television, learning is achieved better because it is complementing. So what they are uttering through words, it is explained through pictures too and sound too. Okay, hence the learning is better. Children's comprehension of educational content from media message is dependent on the degree to which the information is central to the narrative. Facts that are tangential to the main flow of a message are learned less well than facts that are central to the message. Facts that are tangential, okay, that are very vivid, plain, clear, but underneath is very difficult to identify. Maybe that is the ideologies they are trying to communicate. Okay. People remember information better when emotional cues are also used, and that is central to the narrative. Okay, that's why people remember very well when an information or message is carried emotionally, because that can influence, persuade the reader, persuade the audience. Facts that are tangible to the main flow of message are learned less well than facts that are central to the message. Also, people remember information better when emotional cues are also. Next one is motivations. When we have a conscious need for a particular kind of experience, we will actively seek out this type of experience in the media, and the chance of us learning from this experience is very high because we have a purpose to do it. We are with a particular motivation to look for that particular experience. So learning will be more high. When we are passive, with motivation we are active. When we are passive, learning can still occur, but it is not as likely. Also, people who have achieved a higher level of education and who have a higher level of intelligence are more motivated to seek out information from the media. So they don't stop with what is present. They go beyond, okay? They go beyond inquiring, knowing about it. They seek a person who is well knowledgeable in that particular area. These people select the information that has the greatest utility to them. So motivation, fluctuation factor. Next is states. A state is a temporary drive or emotional reaction that occurs in response to some stimuli. The state of mind, we say, state of mind. In which state of mind have you reacted to this particular incident? Okay, that's what we, in our common general conversation, we talk about. Oftentimes, something will happen in our life that will cause us to feel angry or frustrated. Okay, this state can interact with media content and lead to certain effects. What are they? For example, someone who is frustrated and then use violence will be much more likely to behave aggressively than if only one of these conditions is present. For example, a person is angry. So he or she is in that particular state of mind. At that time, if he watches a film where an angry person throws bottle in order to express anger, the same behavior will be adopted by that particular viewer. Okay. The media frequently alter our psychological states. Perhaps the most important of these states is arousal. When we are aroused, evoked, okay, or evoked, our attention is more concentrated and the experience is more vivid for us. We will remember the portraits more and will be more likely to act while accused. Producers of media messages know that certain production techniques tend to arouse audiences. Okay, for example, as I said, or maybe I said in the global communication. Now today with the films that we are making, okay, there is no difference between public space and private space. Okay, private space is publicized. For example, lip lock scenes, close intimate relationship between husband and wife. These are all publicized. Okay, so they know the producers of the media, producers of messages. Okay, they know what sort of techniques can be incorporated in order to arouse audience. These techniques include fast cuts, quick motion within a frame, loud music, sound effects. This is as part of editing techniques. Okay, so we will see the next concepts in the next class, students. I have a family emergency, hence I'm leaving. Thank you, Anjaya.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Rafiq. Thank you, 489498. Thank you so much.